The regular games you go to, there are 15 games going on that day. There are 161 more games that season. When you go to a World Series game, there are only 2 teams left. 28 teams are sitting at home and watching on television. The atmosphere is like, okay, this is real pressure. This is the whole shebang. This is it, that there could be no tomorrow.
So on Saturday night, the NLCS was over, and the Red Sox were already in. The Dodgers beat the Brewers. So we wake up Sunday morning, and we know it's going to be Dodgers and Red Sox. And the game is on Tuesday. So on Sunday morning, I just decide, hey, let's get on this. Let's try to see if I can find 5 people who would go to the World Series in 48 hours. And I had my old faithful, good friend Patrick Cameron locked and loaded. He was ready to go. So then I needed to find 4 more people who were going to be committed to go in less than 48 hours. They had to be spontaneous. They had to be ready to act and move quickly.
We found out about the trip on Sunday afternoon from a Facebook post that Mark had made. And I connected Dad and Mark together to discuss that, and it was less than 36 hours before we had to leave and catch a flight to Boston.
Fast forward to Monday morning, and I'm still looking for 2 more people to go. And I get a phone call about 10 o'clock that morning from a lady named June. And she goes, my husband is 88 years old, and his name is George, and he hasn't been to Fenway Park in over 70 years, and he would like to go back. Can you make that happen? And I couldn't get out yes fast enough. And that's how the 5 people came together. And Tuesday morning, we meet up at the airport. Patrick and I meet the 4 of them for the very first time. And that set us off on the journey.
We got on the plane, everything was good. And then at some point during the flight, there was a rush up front and kind of a medical emergency. And I started thinking like, well, that's the area where George and June were sitting. So I went up there and looked, and sure enough, George was having a medical incident. And so I went back to Mark and Patrick and said, hey, some of our folks, some of your folks may be having a challenge.
We didn't really know what was wrong, and when we land the plane, the paramedics are there, there's an ambulance waiting on him, Miss June is taking care of him, but as the trip planner, I'm really concerned about George. I had just met him, but I just felt a sense of duty and responsibility to make sure that he's looked after. And they rushed George to Mass General Hospital just a few minutes away, and we tell them that we'll be there in just a few minutes. And they check George in, and we find out pretty quickly that George is okay. Like, George has not had an episode of anything that's going to really alter our trip, but they just had to run a lot of tests to ensure that he was all right. But George is determined, no matter how sick they're telling him he is or is not, that he's getting to Game 1 of the World Series. So the day before we leave, I buy us the ballpark tour at Fenway Park for the day of Game 1 of the World Series. We're walking into an empty Fenway Park with the Ted Williams red seat out in right field, with the green monster all there by itself. And we walk in, and there is James Taylor singing the national anthem to an empty Fenway Park.
Each of our trips, we're always astounded by Mark's knowledge of baseball folks. Mark actually spots Mitch Poole. And we're like, okay, who's Mitch Poole?
What Mitch Poole is known for is in 1988, in Game 1 of the World Series, he was in the clubhouse in the training room with Kirk Gibson as he was getting treatment on his hobbled leg and feeding balls to him off the tee.
Gibson told him to go tell Tommy Lasorda he was ready to hit in that famous pinch hit in Game 1 of '88. And you were the guy. You delivered the message.
Yeah, I was. Kurt told me that he was going to do it, and he did.
Then he's up to bat, and he hits the most iconic home run, fist-pumping home run in World Series history.
And we're like, man, that's pretty cool. And so for the opportunity of Mark just go out and talk to Mitch Poole and to get that autograph and picture and just make it happen.
That afternoon, we pick him up from the hospital, we bring him to the ballpark, and the look on his face was like he was a kid all over again. And NBC Boston heard about the story, and they interviewed him. They did a 2-minute feature on him that night about him getting back to Fenway Park after he got sick. We walked down the street and we're right in front of the team store. The Cut 4 crew from MLB.com meets George, and they don't want to talk about him being sick. All they want to talk about is George being at Fenway Park in the 1940s. Walking into Fenway with George after what he's been through to get there, and to see the look on his eyes when he walks up those steps for the first time and he sees the Green Monster. And he sees all the pomp and circumstance surrounding the World Series.
We're going to see this darn thing.
Yeah, what do you think, George?
We're going to see it.
Does it look much different?
Yes. No, not really.
This trip was probably one of my favorite trips that I've ever taken. Dad and I, we used to travel a lot together, actually, especially in high school and college years. But then, I graduated law school and moved back and get married and have children, and life gets really busy. And so we haven't had a trip together in a very long time, especially just the two of us. And so it was a very short trip, but it was a lot of fun, and we got to do things that we used to do on vacation when I was younger.
I think we lost 8-4 with Kershaw pitching. It was certainly not ideal, and it was easily one of the best days of 2018, and it's one of the best days of my life. It could not have been enjoyed more.
Boston is such a great atmosphere, and so loved the history there, and it was just an incredible experience.
My takeaway easily is take time out. Life will go on. Things will function, but these windows, this 36 hours in October of 2018 was 36 hours really well spent.